Well, delighted to be with everybody. A few familiar faces.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Well, a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. So if we want to go around, if you're new onto the call, put your hand up, and Brandon will kind of run through so people can provide a quick introduction. Tell us who you are and what brought you here.
I'll start off with Bradley Cooper, but if the rest of you could use the raise your hand function in the Zoom, then we'll know who's up next. So Bradley, go for it.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So for those of you who follow Hollywood, you probably have recognized the name. When it comes to recruiting and sales and presentation, it's I was born with or named with a great icebreaker because there's a great actor out there, right? So, but just quickly, I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I work. I'm the director of IT with Sasser Workforce Solutions, a light industrial staffing and solutions organization that's focused in North America.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Next up, Nelly.
Hi, everyone. Nelly Tacheva from New Jersey. John Healy brought me here. Thank you, John, for your invitation. We met around an event about the future of work. We are building the future workspace, which is the metaverse, and I would love to connect with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Vijay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vijay. I'm based out of Zurich. I work actually very closely with Bettina, part of the Adecco Group. I run a unit called Ecosystem Solutions and Alliances, and I can talk more about it. Basically, what I try and do is solve complex problems for our clients, which also involves future at work and their future strategies, right? So it's transformational solutions that I provide to clients.
Wonderful. James.
Hi, Brandon. Hi, everyone. It's not actually my first time here, but it's been about 13 months in the wilderness, living the future of work dream. I've relocated to Victoria, BC last summer. I work for Wipro, the big systems integrator, in the capacity of open talent advisor. I just kind of made that job description up. I managed to pitch the need for this into our CTO, and at the moment I'm looking at devising the open talent strategy for Wipro.
Welcome. Good to see you again. Christian.
Thanks, Brandon.
Hey, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. My name's Christian. I co-founded a business called WorkSavvy. So our technology is all about contractor performance and compliance. I had the pleasure of meeting Barry Matthews and James Wright for the first time a few weeks ago in London. Although actually, James, I think you dialed in. I just had a fantastic first kind of chat room session with Dean from freelancer.com. And yeah, look, I'm loving the group and looking forward to getting to know people.
Welcome. Caitlin from NerdApp.
Hi, I know it says NerdApp, it's not NerdApp, it's Caitlin. I am calling in from London. I work for a company called NerdApp. We're a marketplace connecting businesses and consumers to IT technicians. Actually came recommended by Barry and Eleanor. I think they're on here, shout out. But yeah, really looking forward to meeting and connecting with everyone.
Welcome. Pablo.
Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Pablo Lopez, and I'm the COO of Woki, which is a platform based in Madrid. But with that, we're aiming to bring into Latin America platforms of freelancers specializing in consultancy services that we think is very much in need, right, in the region. So I was first, this is not my first time. I was first here because of John Younger and loving this initiative. I'm always trying to come to these meetings. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I think that's it, John.
That's great. So welcome everyone who's new into the group, and look forward to having the voices of those who have been here. So we have one of my favorite people in the world of work who's joining us today, and Bettina Schaller. And if you see her up in two icons on our little Brady Bunch screen, it's because Bettina carries multiple roles. So she's a senior vice president at the Adecco Group, and so one of the largest labor providers to enterprises in the world, and a variety of different services that are associated there. I'm sure she can kind of talk through that. But Bettina also serves as the president of the World Employment Confederation. And many of you who have been around here have known that that's an organization that I remain active in. I represent Kelly at the World Employment Confederation. It's a group that focuses on advocacy for healthy labor markets around the world, with members in roughly 50 countries around the world who are out actively working with labor ministers and with organizations to try to ensure that we have healthy labor markets, and that the role of labor market intermediaries is one that's respected and appreciated, that standards are built out. So when we hear some of those things, they're very similar to a lot of the stuff that we talk about as a group, except they do a lot of the active lobbying along the way. So we asked Bettina to come and join us today. And she's fresh off of two events in May that I think could be relevant. She may have some things to share with us. One was the World Employment Conference itself, the event that our organization hosts. And the other was in Davos, Switzerland, with the World Economic Forum, where Adecco has played a very important role for several years there. And then in the forward-looking side of things, there's two reports. I think in the announcement for the meeting, we referenced one, which is tied to the G20 and B20 and the Future of Work and Education Task Force, in a report that's coming out. There's also a report that the World Employment Confederation and the IOE are working on, very specific to the platform industry and digitization, and that's in preparation for an event that the ILO, or the International Labor Organization, will be hosting. So all of those, bring some things that are relevant to this community that's focused on the digital marketplaces and the platforms that are core to how people are connecting with work these days. So Bettina, welcome.
Thank you, John. What a pleasure to be with you. If I keep looking to the right, it's just to check that, the battery on my phone is on, because that's indeed where I'm speaking. So guys, this is definitely a bucket list moment for me, I must say, because I've been following the development of this group and of the Center for the Transformation of Work for quite some time. Always super excited, by the way, to follow what John and the colleagues in that space are doing. And so when John asked me to join, I was literally jubilating personally, because I was really actually hoping to somehow, integrate this group. So absolutely delighted to be with you, John. Thank you so much for the first set of introductions. So I'd be happy indeed to, if that's okay, give a little bit more color on my background.
Perfect.
So that you guys can kind of put me in a drawer or put into context. So I've been in the sector, in the workforce solutions sector, for almost 13 years now, and came into it with a background of government affairs geek. I'm one of those who spent her education and then the first part of my professional career with anything related to government work. I've touched on it in the financial services industry, in the sports industry. I actually also worked for government, for the Swiss government. I was a diplomat for a short while and was posted in Brussels at the Swiss mission to the European Union. I stumbled upon the workforce solutions and talent industry by absolute coincidence. I must be honest, I didn't know it. I was approached by somebody at the Adecco Group, so this Swiss-based multinational, and I was asked to join as the lead for the government affairs issues and challenges. I immediately realized how incredibly fascinating that industry is, and how much had to be done in terms of notably the government affairs aspect. So in my daily work, I have, over the years been able to build up the government affairs for the Adecco Group, but have also indeed over the years added some elements and some other mandates to my daily work. So John, you mentioned the World Employment Confederation. I've been involved from the beginning and was indeed about 2 years ago soon voted on as president of this World Confederation, which brings together the largest companies in the sector, in the traditional flexible placement, let's say, and talent solution space. Indeed here, this is parallel to what the Adecco Group does as well. So we've got those companies that cover, the full spectrum of solutions that clients need, but that workers need as well. So it's from the actually training part in the early days in the work-based solutions part, to the sourcing part, to the onboarding part, to the actual employing part. And there's various forms of employment that we provide. And then there's the whole re and upskilling part, the whole transitioning part, which also includes, of course, solutions that are needed to transition people out of the labor market again in a decent way. And on the worker side, the companies and the members that World Employment Confederation has, again, we look after the worker from the moment that the worker is basically in the age of legally working, looking to be trained, looking to get a job, looking to be assessed, looking to be re and upskilled, looking to be taken from one industry to the other. So that whole transition piece, and again, also looking to exit again. Now this, in a way, traditional world of work is one, and now I'm coming back to the government side, which actually needs still a lot of advocacy towards governments, because that's one of the elements that I keep noticing. Somehow, even though for a country it is absolutely key in terms of competitiveness and attractiveness to have the right talent strategy, and for a country, of course, that means to have the right labor market strategy, and therefore the right labor market regulation and the right labor market infrastructure or framework in place. Well, most countries don't attribute enough importance to that. And that's something we see a lot now post-COVID, right? Where we realize that COVID was, of course, a healthcare issue or a health crisis and a health link to health issues, but it was mainly as well a labor market crisis, right? And in many countries, measures linked to the labor market again have been and continue to be absolutely key. But we already saw that importance in the pre-COVID times, linked to, of course, the development of technology, and that's where you guys, of course, sit right into it, and the whole discourse around the greening of the economy. And now lately, the latest concept which has come in is everything related to greening plus, so the whole ESG agenda. So to come back, labor market issues, absolutely key for countries. And I say this from a completely objective position, without any bias, of course. Just fully, again, reading how a country needs to be set up in order to compete with other countries. Reading, for instance, what high levels of unemployment do to a country's competitiveness, reading what huge percentages of informality do to a country that hasn't got that under control. And again, what that means for economic growth for a country. But with all of that, also recognizing that everybody who works in this sector of talent doesn't have enough advocates out there to talk to governments, to talk to policymakers so that they make the right decisions. Right. And this is the space I'm sitting in, where together with a multitude of colleagues, John being one of the big ones, and I'm sure many of you on this call specifically today are actually also active. So obviously we're trying to, well, on the one hand side, address those misconceptions. We're looking to bring information, transparency to the policymakers. We're looking to break down complexities. And since COVID, this has been one of the biggest issues we see, because there are all these new ways of work. There are all these contracts out there. There are ways of organizing work. So many, again, new approaches to how work is being conducted. Policymakers, again, completely lost. So that is the space we're in. Now, of course, John, and I'm just going to continue. I can see you. I'm going
to grill you then. Let's have some. So, Bettina,
yes, grill me. Love that.
In Davos, one of the papers that was released was called the Good Work Framework, the new business agenda for the future of work. And they talk about 5 primary objectives: promoting fair pay and social justice, providing flexibility and protection, delivering on health and well-being, driving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then fostering employability and a learning culture. And when you go through that, there isn't a differentiation for digitally enabled workers versus full-time employees versus temporary workers versus gig workers. But in your sense, the dialogue that took place, how much was the emphasis on the fact that the market has turned into a digital marketplace for so many?
Not enough, John, not enough. And I'm actually, kudos on you for bringing this paper up first in the context of the World Economic Forum, because it's actually caused quite some discussions amongst those who were involved with the discussions. And I actually had the pleasure to be a part of that. This paper was initiated by the community of chief HR officers of certain companies. And maybe here I'm going to share the first unease that we had on our side. And when I say we here, it's the Adecco Group. It's the fact that it was only a certain limited number of companies that got together with the absolute best of intentions. So this is clear and no contestation on that one. They mean well. And, the first glance of the Good Work Framework is, wow, this all makes sense, right? But what we realized quickly is that actually this is an agenda of certain multinationals who are, looking to make their own agenda look good as well. But in the discussions, we realized that it fell short of many realities of the world of work, one of them being what you just mentioned, right? So it really, of course, caters to the needs actually of the multinational and less looks at the lens of what the worker wants and needs and, what that framework should look like. The other piece that made us feel very uncomfortable, and, these are not technicalities, but the Adecco Group decided actually not to adhere to the framework. And it was difficult for us because, again, we felt there are so many things that, sound very good and that actually we know that the industry, so also World Employment Confederation, would sign up at any moment. But there's one issue that we had, or 2 big issues. And the first one is, again, we struggle with the fact that it's those 20 plus multinationals who claim that they're setting a standard or a framework, when we are currently still very much focused towards actually a broader architecture of work. Now, of course, I'm the first one, and I'm well aware of the standard setting discussions that are happening in the space that we're in right now in this group, right? And I'm well aware that very often it's important for an industry to set their own standards. But again, that's an industry. And here we have multinationals from various ambits who are actually not in the world of work, right? And so they're now setting a framework, whereas actually there are people, and there are institutions, and here I have to name notably the International Labour Organization, which and this might sound a little bit traditional, so challenge me on it, but in my view, if we look at standard setting, we have to go also through the International Labour Organization and recognize the tripartism, so government, workers, and businesses, of course, as that standard setting framework. One thing there, though, we have an issue with the representation in the tripartism. And this, by the way, is something that I'm working on heavily in the context of the OECD. The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where I'm part of the so-called Business at OECD Employment, Labor and Social Affairs Committee. I'm actually the vice chair of that, where we say, you know what, this tripartism is something that needs to be broken up. And we need to bring the voices of the workers or organizations like the one that we're just brought together here into that, official, basically, negotiation table. So I hope this doesn't sound contradictory. So if, and I'll come back to this specific good work framework, as I said, the one issue I have is, to me, the framework has a lot of good points, but it falls short on a few elements. It's not all the right people around the table. And the other piece, to be very open as well, is the framework actually was binding and is binding, requesting reporting, to start now at the end of the year, according to, again, the principles that are laid out in the framework. And we felt at the Adecco Group now again that we wanted to actually follow our own agenda, which we have set. So we, as a multinational company, understanding, what the different labor market frameworks are in the 60 countries that we operate in,
And that might be the battery point that she was worried about on her phone. Oh,
you can't hear me anymore? Okay, good.
You just came back.
When did you lose me? And the battery still looks good. So
okay, it was just maybe 10 seconds.
A Scotland connection here. So where did you lose me, John? Did you lose me when I was saying that we have an issue actually with the requirement the framework puts on the signatories to start reporting as of Q3, Q4 this year, where we know it is not realistic. To be honest, I don't think there's many, if not any business out there that's able to start, reporting. Of course, you can think about putting in place your internal, you can start somewhere, which is something that I can say the Adecco Group is doing. But again, we felt we weren't comfortable in this context. So this was a long answer to this specific piece, John. Maybe just in general about the World Economic Forum meeting. There were actually four big topics, right, in the big space. The first one had to be Ukraine, of course. I mean, the Ukraine war in May at its height, still, of course, now, but the presence of the Ukrainian delegation was just, overwhelming to some extent. And there were, of course, discussions there around how can Ukrainians who either have fled the countries or those who are still in Ukraine work? How can they pay their bills? How can they continue to have access to capital when, bank accounts are frozen, when obviously some of their employers, have left the country or have stopped operations? And it was obviously their key to be part of those conversations, which are, around platforms where Ukrainians can find work, around making sure that those platforms obviously channel companies and businesses with appropriate jobs, and then making sure that, again, the Ukrainian workers who are looking for jobs in a way are being, vetted appropriately, that all of that actually happens in a cyber secure way, because we had indications that that there were potentially Russian hackers involved, etc. So all of these conversations took place in that Davos context, in that broader Ukraine context. The second big angle touched on in Davos was around the fact that the world is in crisis. Now, it might not sound surprising, but just this bringing together health crisis, food crisis, talent shortage, energy crisis, everything, obviously inflation, which back then the signals were starting to grow, and now we know that this is one of the major issues. And the fact that geopolitics have become so important again, that was a big piece of the equation. And what was interesting to me is where does the labor market fit into that? Because of course, are we in a labor market crisis actually? And I'm honestly actually more of the opinion that for labor markets, it's more of an opportunity side of things. It's more of a, the COVID has broken up and has given us the opportunity to break up so many crusts that we have been dealing with, since basically the Second World War. And, measures which governments for years told us are impossible to consider, all of a sudden were possible. So I'm actually, from a labor market perspective, in a mood where I'm thinking, wow, this is exciting. And I think it's very interesting because it's a huge contrast to what else is happening in the world, right? And I think the figures, the latest BLS figures in the US are showing it, right? And people are trying to understand this, where there's inflation and crisis on the one hand side, but the labor market is booming. So a very interesting space to be in. The third point, and now I want to pick up one of the members said it before. So the third issue that was huge in that was the metaverse. The metaverse. So anybody of you in that space, clearly you're bringing the future to the present. I walked away from Davos thinking that's it. It's going to come. It's going to be here. So, I mean, the way we are having this conversation is still pretty analog. It's still pretty old style. I'm pretty convinced, I don't know when, let's say in a year, maybe it's a bit longer, maybe it's earlier, but I'll be sitting here with my avatar. And by the way, my avatar is going to have a pink Iroquois and, tattoos all over. And we might pick a meeting room in Kuala Lumpur on the 30th floor or on a beach somewhere. And digitally, with all the options, we're going to have a different type of conversation. So this is just the basics, of course, of what the metaverse can do, right? There's so much more, and you will all know better. But in my view, this is coming. So now I've given you just the insights on Davos. And as you can see, there's always this link to us, to the labor market, to workers, to how we organize ourselves, what it means for us. So that was Davos, John.
I think it's really interesting, just the whole concept as you start tying into the metaverse, and Nelly, who does a lot of work in the metaverse, and I were at Velocity's event last week, and the idea of providing agency to the worker over their own information by having digital wallets and by sharing those credentials and enabling them to gain access to work more effectively. Clearly, that's been part of what we focused on in the World Employment Confederation as an industry, to try to really look at what we can do to take 2 weeks out of that process of hiring a worker and onboarding them, and for the worker 2 weeks quicker to receiving a paycheck. So I think that there's some real big opportunity there. So one of the pieces that it intrigues me, because we've got these reports that are being developed constantly, and as I've gotten to know this community, sometimes it's hard for the startups, for these new platforms that are emerging in markets to find their space, to get their voice heard through some of this legislation, to have a say in what's being brought out. Any suggestions or recommendations of where they should be engaging, how better to include the voice? Because as you said, you're concerned with the World Economic Forum report and their framework was the lack of the voice of the worker in there. And clearly that's one that we think that the digital marketplaces are proving, is that the worker is asking for something different. So any thoughts or suggestions on how everyone in the community should be working to get their voice heard differently?
Yeah, well, I think the classic answer would be join a trade union. It might not be the answer most favored by many people, and also depending on the culture. And actually, between us, even though I'm a big fan of collective bargaining, the principle of it, it would actually also not necessarily be my favorite answer as it is. Now, this is a tough part, and it's the part that we need to be figuring out. I mean, first of all, there's a matter of organizing yourselves, which is why initiatives like this one are key, right? It's to scale the voice, bring it together, and gain a certain mass and scale, of course. And then it's a matter of entering the processes, the structures that currently exist, which brings me back to all those expert roundtables and organizations that I started to allude to in the beginning. And actually here, John, I'd like to make a link to the ILO meeting of experts on platform work that is going to take place in October. You, of course, alluded to that when you talked about the reports that are being prepared and the work that World Employment Confederation is focusing on notably. So maybe just I'm going to take a step back again, because I hope this is not too abstract per se. So in the whole space of platform work, and probably the space that we're talking about here, the open talent economy, right? The policy world is currently waiting and holding its breath for two things to happen. The first one is linked to the consultation of the European Commission on platform work regulation. You will all have heard it. I'm pretty sure you will have discussed that already. There is a proposal on the table by the European Commission. Currently, contributions to the consultations are being made. And eventually, the Commission will bring all of that together. And eventually, there will be a directive, which then member states, so 20 plus countries, let's think about how many countries will still be members of the EU or members again, I don't know by then. So 20 plus countries will have to think about how to put in place regulation around platform workers. This is major. This is major, and it's happening as we speak. The other piece is in that ILO context, right? The International Labour Organization, which wants to, in about 2 years' time, at the global level, do the same exercise than the EU is basically doing right now. And in order to prepare that huge conversation that will happen globally in about 2 years' time, there is this first meeting of experts that takes place now in October in Geneva at the ILO, the International Labour Organization headquarters. At this meeting of experts, there will be 24 experts. There will be 8 experts from governments. Those have to be picked amongst the 200 governments in the world. There will be 8 experts from the trade unions. They have to be picked from all the trade unions around the world, highly political. And there will be 8 experts from the employer side, the private sector, the organized private sector. And now here for your visibility, so World Employment Confederation, also the Adecco Group, are currently submitting our interest to have 1 or 2 seats of those 8 seats. And we are allowing ourselves to justify that request with the fact that, of course, we have been working for many years on this topic, and that we believe we bring a perspective to the table, which is also the perspective of the worker. So John, answering your question as well, I hope, one way for the worker to also bring the voice in is to find the right allies, and work through those. By the way, we do that in other topics as well, right? It's finding the right channels, right? So we're looking to be part of those 8 experts in October, and again, crafting and making sure that the good pieces, as we read it, that are in, to come back, the good work framework of the World Economic Forum, that they find their way into those discussions as well. That obviously those pieces from the EU Commission proposal find their way into those proposals as well. And that then, the main points that now Center for the Transformation of Work has would also find their way into the proposal.
I really appreciate you sharing even just the depth of the structure of that. I think
the mechanisms often, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think so often the people in this community are just simply trying to help people get to work more effectively.
I know, and thank Lord. And I think we need all the layers, right? And clearly, what is being done out there is absolutely fantastic. But what we don't need is, again, I'm gonna be very undiplomatic here. It's ignorant, dogmatic, bureaucratic policymakers who hinder you guys, to put people at work. That we don't need. So again, there's a group of people, which I'm a part of, you're a part of, John, that are addressing that angle as well.
Cool. Well, I hope and certainly open the floor to if there are specific questions for Bettina here, but the importance of each of us having a voice along the way and recognizing that policies are being created with or without us, and taking the opportunity to get engaged where you can, to speak up on behalf of your workforce, the people that you represent, the people that you bring into the market, and also the processes and policies that are going to enable people to work more efficiently and work the way that they want to, are so important.
John, you just said something here which triggers me, which is the policies are going to be formulated and approved without us. So our approach has always been, no. Let's sit at the table, and let's do whatever we can to basically, speak for ourselves, right? Because it's going to happen. It's a process that is out there. And as I said, it's one of the hottest industries to be in right now, also for policymakers, actually. So there will be a lot coming our way. I have not been looking at the chat, by the way. So if there's any questions there, please, spell them out, because I've tried to keep the chat away. I can open it if you want, if there's any questions there, but don't hesitate to jump in. Yeah.
No, it's certainly interesting. Anyone on the line have specific questions that they want to pose to Bettina?
I raised my hand.
Link, go for it.
Go ahead, Link.
I have a question. Great conversation, great information. Not necessarily a positive, all of it, but very good information, and it really kind of guides what we really need to be working on in the future of work, on the advocacy side, really too. But my question pertains to, you talked about bringing together the experts to advise the governments, because they're going to make the decision with or without us anyway. We've got to have a seat at the table. But once the experts come together and that information is kind of shared and put out there, some of it's going to be accepted, some of it's not. But once it is accepted, who owns that information? Now we're talking about money sharing, right, and profit sharing with sectors of workforce and somebody profiting. And so who ends up, do the governments end up benefiting more? Does the work enterprise or the business enterprise benefit more? At the end of the day, who owns the material that gets put out? Does that make sense? Am I making sense? I'm just thinking the outcome, because that's a challenge, right?
I'm gonna try to give you an answer, and if that's not what you're looking for, because I might have misunderstood, you must redirect me. Ownership, I think, on these issues should be public, should be open. It should be for the benefit of society. What we're doing here is we're building our frameworks, our new frameworks. And any good government actually should operate in transparency, right? And should also lay out all the dissenting voices and should be very clear about what has led to the final decision and to the final regulation, acknowledging, that very often it might also be in this moment of time, this is the best that we can do as a government, let's say. But we might acknowledge that we might have to revise it again in 5 years or 10 years time, when there will be more technological advancement, when we will have more visibility on preferences of workers in the labor market. Maybe also when we will have finally more innovation in terms of labor protection, in terms of models like part-time work or the whole discussion around working time. By the way, let me just open a bracket here. I mean, we still, with working time, in all the countries, operate with a system that was basically decided 70 years ago, where we expect it needs to be a certain amount of hours. That is the result of, again, collective agreements, negotiations, etc. In my view, we need to break all of that open as well, right? And obviously it's happening. We know, again, this community knows that productivity matters more than time. Well, how is this reflected in the regulation? But again, we might make a regulation in 2 years, 3 years time, which should be open and transparent, taking in what we know now, and then hopefully, with the capability of saying things will continue to evolve. So we're going to have to continue to revise that. I hope, Link, that this is somehow satisfactory to you.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, overall,
it's the challenge. It's who takes responsibility when things needs to be changed. If no one owns it and it's the public's, then who takes responsibility? And if somebody takes responsibility, how willing are they to amend later? So that it opens the thought. You may not have the answer to it like we don't, but it's something I think really to think about, really consider when we move forward to go, God, how malleable are those changes and possibilities to change a framework later? But
yeah. Look, I mean, I'm probably going to add a wishy-washy element here, because we've thought we keep on thinking a lot about this at the World Employment Confederation, at the Adecco Group as well. At the Adecco Group, we worked a lot on the notion of the new social contract, which is heavily based on the fact that we need to rethink the relationship, the responsibilities and expectations that the key stakeholders have in the labor market. And as key stakeholders, we're maybe a bit simple, I don't know, but we say it's governments, it's business, and it's workers. And what we say is all of them have expectations, but also responsibilities. And so probably my answer here would be is shared responsibility. Because one of the things we're seeing in many countries, workers still expect a lot from the government, also in terms of protection, in terms of financing. In future, that's actually not going to be, financeable anymore, right? But how does this work then with the other sides? So,
John Windsor, you're being awful polite with a hand raised and not
I
just
know. Look at me.
so.
I'm usually the one that's always like interrupting everybody. And first of all, I have to apologize to everybody for being a little late to the call today. And then secondly, Bettina, thanks so much for being on this. It's really, really informative. I think for me, the question is, we all live in this kind of new world of work, and we're, in a place where we get to see this transformation of remote and of project work, and the flip from talent to task as a priority. What are the tasks that need to be done versus, let's hire somebody and let them figure out the task, right? This whole reorganization, not just of how people work, but actually the structure of how work will get done in the future. And I just, I think that it's important. I agree with you. It's important for this community to have a voice because we're at the edge of what's really happening for the future. And one of the things I'm fearful of in this cycle of decisions being made is that the information is from a perspective and a mindset that is historic. So how do we, what are the three things we can do to offer our insights, to offer our help in informing people to make decisions that are going to be based on the next 10 years instead of the last 5 years or the last 3 years in the context of COVID?
It's a great comment, John. And to me, it's also a discussion around risk taking and fears. Because a lot of the conversation is always around protection and safeguards, which yes, they're absolutely key, but it restricts the way that you approach policymaking.
Sure.
If you constantly have to, and maybe we're talking about, intuitively about the same thing, you're holding back, you're always, instead of opening, looking at the future, looking at opportunities, at possibilities. So there's an element of trust here as well, right? And that is a big step of transformation that the market is going through. So workers have made the shift. Anybody here on this call will have made that shift, but policymakers haven't yet. So again, and I think maybe if I don't know if you were there right in the beginning, but a big part of what we do is addressing misconceptions. I actually sometimes use the term of also opening chakras. Guys, it's just there are some bold policymakers out there who are ready to look at it, and those are the ones we confirm that, the world of work, that new world of work is not scary, and that people are not living under the bridge automatically, and that, by the way, still they want to pay their taxes, so it's all possible with structures from before, the old way of doing things. But as you say, it needs to be reshaped. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. Let's shape that together. Let's sit at the table together and create a great future.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's great. I love that. I think just for us, just getting in these conversations is an awesome thing. And I know the guys at the lab, the Laboratory for Innovation Science at Harvard, is another partner and someplace that I spend a lot of time at myself. And so we want to lean in and help as much as we can with the right kinds of research and the right kinds of insights that we're learning. So anything that we can do to support your efforts, I love it. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
I think you've given me your hand. I can assure you I'm going to grab your arm and the whole rest.
Awesome.
Clearly from a World Employment Confederation perspective, and that's something John knows as well. We would love to find a way to just tap into each other's knowledge. And we would love to, we would never allow ourselves to say we represent you because you represent yourselves best, but to make sure that all your messages and voices are brought to those tables that we're able to sit on because we're part of that old system, right?
Yeah, it's important. It's important.
That's the commitment this group has for me, is as those 24 organizations are identified, and we understand who is going to have a seat at that table, so that we can engage with them and bring their voice and bring our voice to them, to at least include into their dialogue. So we're at time.
What?
Bettina, I want to
I
thank
can't
you
believe it.
for taking the time to join us. You're always welcome. The Adecco Group has been active with us throughout, and we appreciate having you here. And I thank everyone for joining on the line. Watch for the recording to go out so everyone can see what's there. We continue to encourage you to invite friends and family, invite the platforms, invite the freelancers to join our calls, so that we can continue these conversations. So with that, I'll wrap and say thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Be safe, guys.
Ciao.